Semantics. According to Nirmala Sari 1988, semantics is the study of linguistic meaning, that is, the meaning of words, phrases, and sentences.
Reference. The study of reference. Like the study of sense can be divided into two areas. The first one is the speaker reference and the second is linguistic reference. So, speaker reference is what the speaker is referring to by using some linguistic expression. Linguistic reference. On the other hand, the systematic denotation of some linguistic expression as part of the language. So there are the same concepts that seem to be useful in thinking and talking about references. There are referent, extension, prototype, and stereotype. And some different types of linguistic reference is coreference, anaphora, and deixis. One well-known approach to semantics attempts to equate a word's meaning with the entities which refer its reference. According to this story, the meaning of the word dog corresponds to the said entity's dogs that it picks out in the real world, although it's not inherently implausible. This idea encounters certain serious difficulties. Extension and intention. The possibility of equating a word's meaning with its reference has led to distinction between extension and intention. Whereas a word's extension corresponds to the set of entities that it picks out in the real world. Its intention corresponds to its inherent sense. So we can say at the table there is extension versus intention. So this distinction between a word's extension and intention does not allow us to resolve the questions of meaning. So it simply permits us to pose it in a new way. So first is prototype. A typical member of extension of referring expression is a prototype of expression.
Let's proceed to stereotype. Stereotype is a list of characteristics describing a prototype is said to be stereotype. Stereotype are characteristics that society instinctively attributes to groups of people to classify them according to age, weight, occupation, skin color, gender, and etc. For example, the stereotype of bird might be something like has 2 legs, 2 wings, 2 feathers, is about 6 to 8 inches from head to tail, makes a chirping noise, lays eggs, builds nests, and so on. That is stereotype. Coreference. Coreference, two linguistics expressions that have the same extra-linguistic referent are said to be coreferential. Consider, for example, the sentence "the Earth is third place from the Sun." The expressions "the Earth" and "the third planet from the Sun" are coreferential because they both refer to the same extra-linguistic object, namely the heavenly body that we are spinning around on right now. However, the Earth, and the third planet from the Sun do not mean the same thing. Suppose, for example, a new planet were discovered, which is Mercury, the first planet from the Sun, and the Venus, the second planet from the Sun. If so, then the Earth would become the fourth planet from the Sun, and Venus would become the third. Thus, the expressions "the Earth" and "the fourth planet from the Sun" would become coreferential. Coreference. Anaphora. Anaphora, a linguistic expression that refers to another linguistic expression, is said to be anaphobic or an anaphor. Consider the sentence Mary wants to play whoever thinks himself capable of beating her. In this sentence, a linguistic expression himself necessarily refers to whoever, thus himself is being used anaphorically in this case. Anaphora refers to referentially dependent expressions in natural language which contribute their meaning by identifying another expression to give them their semantic value. Anaphora, in its primary instances, is the establishment of a referential dependency between two or more expressions. Anaphora. Deixis. Deixis refers to the phenomenon wherein understanding the meaning of certain words and phrases in an utterance requires contextual information. An expression that has one meaning but refers to different entities as the extra-linguistic context change every 24 hours. In other words, deictic expressions have a pointing function. They point to entities within the context of the utterance. However, that anaphora and deixis can intersect. In the first case, a pronoun refers to another linguistic expression. It is used anaphorically when, as in the second case, it refers to some entity in the extra-linguistic context. It is used deictically. Deixis.
So, what is semantic feature? A semantic feature is a component of the concept associated with a lexical item. Example, female plus performer equals actress. More generally, it can also be a component of the concept associated with any grammatical unit, whether composed or not. So, what is lexical relation? Lexical relation are words that has meaning in relation to other words. There are 6 types of lexical relations, such as hyponymy, synonymy, antonymy, polysemy, homonymy, and meronymy. So, the synonyms of lexical are grammatically, rather grammatical, lingual, dialectual, etymological, and lexical. The antonyms of lexical are words lying in the inherently incompatible binary relationship.
Hyponymy. The meaning of one form is included into meaning of another. The relationship is described as hyponymy. There are 5 some typical example pairs. The poodle flower, dog animal, poodle dog, carrot vegetable, and banyan tree. The poodle symbolizes rebirth and new beginnings. This is the example of the poodle. The second one is dog animal, so familiar na to ang dog animal. The third one is the paddle dog. Any of the breed of intelligent dog that have a fairly dense, solid colored coat and that are grouped into standard miniature. So this is the example. The fourth one is the carrot vegetable. So familiar na to ang carrot vegetable. The last one is banyan tree. The banyan tree represents growth, strength, and self-awareness through reflection. This is the example of the picture of banyan tree. So this is the illustration of hyponymy, living things. The right side is creature and the left side is plant. First, dog stick is to belong to animals. Cockroach and ants is to belong to insects. The left side is carrot is to belong to vegetable. The poodle is to belong to flower. The banyan and pine is to belong to tree. From this diagram, we can say that horse is a hyponym of animal or that ant is hyponym of insect. We can also say that 2 or more terms which shares the same superordinate. Higher up terms are hyponyms. There are three other less well-known terms which are often used to describe relationships between words in a language: homopony, homonymy, and polysemy. The first of these is homopony. When two or more different written forms have the same pronunciation, they are described as homophones. Homonymy is used when one from written and spoken has two or more unrelated meanings. Homonyms are words which have quite separate meanings but which have accidentally come to have exactly the same form. Relatedness of meaning accompanying identical form is technically known as polysemy, which can be defined as one form, written or spoken, having multiple meanings which are all related by extension. The distinction between homonymy and polysemy is not always clear-cut. However, one indication of the distinction can be found in the typical dictionary entry for words. Overlap. Two words overlap in meaning if they have the same value for some, but not all, of the semantic features that constitute their meaning. This phenomenon can be accounted for by stating that part of the meaning of each of these words is characterized as true. The study of truth or truth condition in semantics falls into two basic categories: the study of different types of truth embodied in individual sentences, analytic, contradictory, and scientific, and the study of different types of truth relations that hold between sentences, entailment, and presupposition.
So here is the two basic categories of truth. The first one is analytic sentences. Analytic sentences is one of the necessarily true as a result of the word in it. Part for knowledge or ordinary English is a bachelor, means an unmarried man, thus to say that one is the most necessarily be true. We don't need to check our outside world to verify the truth of this sentence. We might say that analytic sentences are the true by definitions. Analytic sentences are sometimes referred to the linguistic truth because they are true by the virtue of language itself. The second one is synthetic sentences. Synthetic sentences that may be true or false depending upon how the world is are called synthetic. So, in each case, the truth of the facility of the sentence can be verified only by consulting the state of affairs that holds in the world. Thus, synthetic sentences are sometimes referred to as empirical truth or falsities because they are not true or false by virtue of the state of the intralinguistic world. So the next one is entailment. One sentence entails another if the meaning of the first sentence includes the meaning of the second. So in other words, this is not to say, however, that there cannot be fairer sentences such as the each entails the other. Rather, when such relation holds, it is called paraphrase. For example, Tammy was driving home by Beth. If it's paraphrase of Beth drove Tammy home. So that's a paraphrase. So the last one is the presupposition. Presuppositions is one of the sentence presupposes another if the falsity of the second readers the first without the true value. A sentence without truth value is one of the cannot be judged true or false. Now let's consider an example presuppositions, an example how the concept relies of the nations of sentence without true value. So another property of presuppositions is that sentence and its data have the same set of the presuppositions. Thus, if sentence unicorns, then the denial of sentence, unicorns do not have horns, also presuppose sentence. If there are no unicorns, then unicorns do not have the horns, also presupposes sentence. Like, if there is no unicorns, then unicorns do not have horns, cannot be judged true or false. Consequently, more investigators argue that semantic concepts of entailment that one that presupposes. So here is the two basic categories of truth. The first one is analytic sentences. Analytic sentences is one of the necessarily true as a result of the word in it. Part of our knowledge or ordinary English is a bachelor, means an unmarried man, thus to say that one is the most necessarily be true. We don't need to check our outside world to verify the truth of this sentence. We might say that analytic sentences are the true by definitions. Analytic sentences are sometimes referred to the linguistic truth because they are true by the virtue of language itself. The second one is synthetic sentences. Synthetic sentences that may be true or false depending upon how the world is are called synthetic. So, in each case, the truth of the facility of the sentence can be verified only by consulting the state of affairs that holds in the world. Thus, synthetic sentences are sometimes referred to as empirical truth or falsities because they are not true or false by virtue of the state of the intralinguistic world. So the next one is entailment. One sentence entails another if the meaning of the first sentence includes the meaning of the second. So in other words, this is not to say, however, that there cannot be fairer sentences such as the each entails the other. Rather, when such relation holds, it is called paraphrase. For example, Tammy was driving home by Beth. It is paraphrase of Beth drove Tommy home. So that's a paraphrase. So the last one is the presupposition. Presuppositions is one of the sentence presupposes another if the falsity of the second readers the first without the true value. A sentence without truth value is one of the cannot be judged true or false. Now let's consider an example presuppositions, an example how the concept relies of the nations of sentence without true value. So another property of presuppositions is that sentence and its data have the same set of the presuppositions. Thus, if sentence unicorns, then the denial of sentence unicorns do not have horns also presuppose sentence. If there are no unicorns, then unicorns do not have the horns also presupposes sentence. Like, if there is no unicorns, then unicorns do not have horns, cannot be judged true or false. Consequently, more investigators argue that semantic concepts of entailment that one that presupposes.
Pragmatics. Over the years, pragmatics has become more and more important branch of linguistics as the inadequacies of a formalist, abstract approach to the study of language has become more evident.
Formative refers to a type of action that is performed under the sentence having been uttered. Knowing a language entails understanding how to construct correct sentences, on how to use those sentences to construct appropriate utterances. An utterance is, however, only a performative utterance. It's the condition necessary to make it an act prevail. Knowledge of a language does not simply imply an understanding of the rules that generate an infinite number of sentences. It also entails an understanding of the context and socio-cultural rules that govern the use of sentences to generate appropriate utterances. So most of utterances are performative utterances that can be preceded by performative verbs. In 1955, the British philosopher John L. Austin delivered the William James Lectures at Harvard. These lectures were published in 1962 as to how to do the things with words. Austin's fundamental insight was an utterance can constitute an act. The original idea in Austin's the performative sentences, which are different from constitutive sentences, which could be evaluated as the true or false. Traditionally, performative were not be considered true or false. Rather, they were be the considered felicitus and infelicitus.
Let's proceed to speech acts. Searle, Kiefer, and Berwick state that speech act theory, firstly introduced by Austin in 1962, is a branch of the theory of communication. When people communicate, they make a promise, give praise, negotiate, flatter, and etc. It means that communication or conversation may fulfill much different function. There have been many language philosophers taking language function into their consideration. Speech acts.
So the next topic, dictionary act, is the act of mocking an expressive meaning, extending the spoken language, preceded in silence and then followed by silence, or an exchange of speaker, also known as locution or utterance act. An utterance act is a language that comprises of the verbal employment of units of expression such as words and sentences, whereas propositional acts are clear and expressive with specific, definable point, as opposed to mere utterance act, which may be meaningless sounds. According to Shirley 1969, points out that there is no clear or consistent principle or set of principle on the basis of which the taxonomy is constructed, and consequently a large number of verbs fail in the middle of the two competing categories. So there are 5 basic categories of elocutionary, which is number 1, representative. Representative is locutionary acts that undertake to represent state of affairs, whether past, present, future, or hypothetically. Example, predicting, telling, insisting, suggesting, or swearing that something is the case. Number 2, directive. Elocutionary acts designed to get the addressee to do something. Example, requesting, commanding, ordering, pleading, inviting, daring, and challenging. So number 3 is the commissives. Commissive is elocutionary acts that commit the speaker to do something. For example, promising, threatening, vowing, and offering. So number 4 is the expressive. Expressive is the elocutionary acts that express the only speaker's psychological state. For example, congratulating, thanking, declaring, condoling, welcoming, and apologizing. Last but not the least is the declarations. Declaration is the locutionary acts that bring about the state of affairs referred to. For example, blessing, fining, baptizing, binding, passing, sentence. So, the categories of speech acts are locutionary acts, elocutionary acts, and perlocutionary acts. Okay, so, what is perlocutionary acts? A perlocutionary act is the effect of an utterance on an interlocutor. For example of perlocutionary acts is include persuading, convincing, scaring, enlightening, and inspiring, and otherwise affecting the interlocutor. So,
Felicity conditions refers to performing elocutionary felicitously is not enough to utter a grammatically sentence. Appropriateness conditions is consisting of propositional content role, preparatory role, sincerity role, and essential role. The elocutionary acts can be classified into five categories: representative, directive, permissive, expressive, and declaration. The non-repetitive performance of the elocutionary acts is determined by our felicity, condition, suggested.
So the next one is cooperative principles. Cooperative principles and influence institutions that language is based on form or cooperated among the speakers. For language to be meaningful, both the speaker and hearer must cooperate in what they speak in the way they listen. Because communications has been perceived as a cooperation between the speaker and the hearer. Assumptions and expectations about any topic, how to develop the communications are allotted between both speaker and hearer. It is supported by grace principles, which has been described as cooperative principles. State that Levinson's the cooperative principles makes our contributions such as required at the stage at which occurs by the accepted purpose or directions of the thought exchange in which we engage. Cooperative principles is used as a guide for the speakers and the hearer in verbal interactions so that it can be go smoothly and harmlessly. Misunderstanding, even failure in verbal interactions often occur because people merely have a lot of proficiency and implicatures. Because according to Grace, cooperative behavior in conversational can be described in terms of four conversational maxims. The first one is maxim of quantity. Try making your contributions such as informative as required, no more. The next one is maxim of quality. Try to make your contributions one that is true. The third one is maxims of relevance. Be relevant. It means that make your contributions relevant. Say things and pertinent to discussions. The last one is maxim of manner. Be perspicuous and be specific. So it should be avoid ambiguity, be brief, and be orderly. So, the maxims of the cooperative principles can be used to describe how participants in a conversations derive implicatures. The cooperative principles is of particular interest which a speaker do not follow it breaks of the maxim which Grace himself used the later terms, afloat the maxim, to describe situations in which maxim is being deliberately disobeyed, with the intentions of the hearer recognize that. The reason why what says makes sense in spite of some missing elements is that these elements has been implicated, and these so-called implicatures are made possible by the cooperative behavior of the speaker and the hearer. As these implicatures arise out of the observance and contravent on what Grace has called in conversational maxim, he has termed and the conversational implicatures.